I'm like, oh.
Yep. Got it. Thank you.
Huh?
So if you click on this resources, this was the original resources. So when we went to the NSTA conference last year, that's where we learned about this. I sat in on a presentation, and they have, unfortunately, this is the only storyline for middle school life science, but they are, still working. So there's a whole bunch of them over here. But this is where we pulled everything from. I gave you some of the big things in that storyline folder in the share drive that the big things that we've really changed to make it fit into our curriculum. But like in terms of finding all the videos and everything, this is where you're going to find it. And it gives you the overview and all about those people. It's pretty well set up, and it's got assessments and everything in here. So we're just going to kind of go through some of that and show you what we've done and kind of tell you about the big things that we've changed to make it work for us. So you want to go, Carissa? You ready? Okay.
I had to do all kinds of like finagling with my audio. Okay. So like Adrian, do you want to, if you mute, sorry, we're in the same room because my audio wasn't working in my room, so it's a feedback situation. But we have, this will be our third year, I guess, doing the chickens. Is that right? This will be your third year. Are you clicking through this, bud? So we start with, when we look at we start with kind of like, how does a chicken become an egg, and get kind of their ideas and what they think. And we start there, and then we kind of build from that, trying to get at the point of how organisms grow and develop over time from a cellular level. So we kind of focus on that growth is happening because you're getting more cells, and those cells are differentiating, as opposed to just, they think it's just like there's like a little tiny chicken in there that just gets bigger. But so we kind of focus on why exactly that's happening. So more cells and specialized cells. Also, we're comparing it to the development of other organisms. So the way it's different kind of from egg-laying organisms versus others. So then we can kind of look at a spectrum of organisms and that same growth and development pattern. So those are some of the highlights, I guess. So this is probably because once you get into it, everybody's going to kind of make it their own. So if you're doing the storyline, everybody's going to kind of have their own tweaks to it. So probably the main things you need to know, though, just to get started, are these supplies. So first thing you're going to need, obviously, is an incubator for your eggs. And we've tried a few different kinds, and we have had varying hatch rates. So I had one that I don't think I had any survivors that year, but so it's kind of a disappointing year. But what? Oh yeah, okay. I can't because I don't have a camera. So the first thing you need, obviously, is your incubator. You'll want to get one for the size of however many eggs you're going to have. I would definitely, or we would definitely recommend one with an automatic turner. Some of them don't come with that. So you can buy the turner separately. So if you have one of those old styrofoam incubators, you can buy a turner to go in there, but you do have to rotate the eggs. So if you don't have an automatic turner, you're going to have to do that by hand, which on the weekends and stuff gets to be a bit of a problem. The other thing that's made a huge difference for us is making sure the incubator has a humidity gauge. So we've also found through doing this that humidity is probably the biggest factor for your hatch rate. So when you buy your incubator, making sure that has an automatic humidity gauge on it. Some of the older ones, like those old styrofoam ones, they have like a gauge, but it doesn't regulate or sound any alarm or anything if something's off. And then they're also just not that sensitive. So We have found that if you buy an incubator with a humidity gauge, that makes a huge difference. We bought ours off of Amazon. They have 1,000 different kinds. The one in the picture there, that's the one that Adrian has. Mine's a little bit different, and Odin's is a little bit different than that. So, and then obviously you'll need your eggs. So we have 2 links here. One is to Meyer Hatchery, and then one is to My Pet Chicken. So both of those are hatcheries that will send you fertilized eggs. So, I mean, you have to obviously make sure that they're fertilized or you're not going to have any hatch. But Meyer Hatchery is our preference. So last year after the pandemic, I guess a bunch of people started like raising chickens at home. And so a lot of the hatcheries were completely wiped out of eggs. So they were out and we couldn't get eggs from them. So we ordered from My Pet Chicken. And they did have eggs, but the hatch rate wasn't as good. They were a little bit more difficult to work with. So, I mean, we would recommend Meyer Hatchery if you're choosing between those 2. And things to think about with that is make sure that you talk to your financial person and get your PO started well in advance, because your building is not likely to have a PO with a hatchery set up. So it's a little bit longer process for that person. So if you're thinking of doing it this fall, you may want to go ahead and start getting your POs lined up. Flynn and Netco have eggs too, but we've never used them. We didn't even know they had them until last year. An egg candler is like a really bright flashlight, and so you can put the egg on it and you can kind of see into it a little bit, so you can see if there's any like blood vessel development or anything like that. And there's a few lessons where it tells you to do that. You want to make sure that you don't candle the same egg every time or often, because the more you take them out and handle them, the less likely they are to hatch. And then a brooder box, which is something to put them in after they hatch. So we have some from 4-H that a lady in our building lent to us. You could just use a cardboard box with a heat lamp too. So, no, you're fine. And then, so we have a no pet policy in our district, as you probably are aware. So once they hatch, you need to have a plan as for where they're going to go. And I would just recommend asking around in your building. So in our building alone, we have 3 people that raise chickens. So you may have people who will take them for you. If you don't, we can talk to the people here. And they may take them as well. So just make sure that you have a place for them to go when they hatch, because they can't live in your classroom forever. As much as Mr. Oden would like for them to, they cannot. Okay. So we have it split up into like 15 lessons, so I guess 3 weeks. And you may condense that, or you may change it. Like I said, I mean, once you look at our stuff, you may be like, yeah, I'm not doing that, or that. Or you may have stuff you want to add in, so you may just kind of want to plot it out for your group first. But once you start the eggs, it's about 21 days. Sometimes it's a little more, a little less, but especially since we're doing it in the fall, you have to kind of think about when those breaks are and when those long weekends are, because you don't want them hatching in your incubator and staying there for a long time, because they can get caught in the turners. And then that's kind of a sad situation. So these are all things we've learned from experience. So yeah, just make sure that you have like kind of especially before fall break, like this year, we're thinking about starting October 3rd, so that we have that little bit of a buffer before fall break. So 3 to 4 days, just to make sure that they're not hatching over that time. Also, just make sure that the hatcheries will only ship on certain days. So make sure that you know what day they're shipping and that someone will be there to receive them when they come. So you have to kind of pay attention to weekends and all that stuff. So I mean, just talk to, the hatcheries are pretty, especially Meyer Hatchery, they're very accessible. They have like a helpline on their webpage and you can just type in questions and somebody will get right back to you. So if you're concerned at all about that, just talk to them. So these are the NGSS and the Missouri standards that are covered. So it does hit, you know, a good amount of those life science ones, especially the way that organisms are organized, as well as cells, looking at the way systems function together. So I mean, I'm not going to read all the standards to you, but if you're thinking about it and you're like, you know, is this just hatching chickens or does this actually apply to what we're teaching? This kind of covers some of those learning standards. It also looks at the cross-cutting concepts and some of the science and engineering practices. So one of the biggest ones, I think, is patterns and making models. So we look at patterns a lot, especially when we're comparing the different organisms. So like the way the chicken develops, comparing that to, you know, the way that a human develops or what, looking at some of those issues. So there's also a huge modeling component to it. So I mean, that's kind of one of their big final assessments too, is drawing a model of that development over time. So that's a major component. So, oh, there's disciplinary core again. We kind of talked about those already. Yeah. But yeah, so for the science and engineering practices, the developing and using models is a huge one. They do plan and carry out the investigation. So the very first day, we just we watched like a few videos, and these are in the resources that Adrienne shared with you. But there's a video and it's just like, it's like a 30-second video of a chicken and she's kind of sitting on her eggs and just doing chicken stuff, I guess. But then, so we kind of look at that, like, what is this chicken doing? Because obviously the chicken knows how to make the egg hatch. So what is she doing and how can we replicate that here? And so then they have to kind of plan out, okay, well, the chicken's moving the eggs around. So that probably means we need to move the eggs around, like rotate them, or the chicken is, you know, sitting on them. So if she's keeping them warm, then we probably need to keep them warm. So just kind of, so they kind of set up the investigation at the beginning and how we're going to do that. Obviously, you're going to have to lead them a little bit to make sure you don't have, you know, a bunch of dead eggs, but yeah. And then I'm going to turn it back over to Adrienne. She's going to talk about the notes.
Okay. I went forward. Okay, so notes, like we said, I think originally, if you look in the original curriculum, I think there's like 17 or 18 lessons, but the first year that we did this, we found, especially in the cell portion of it, I think it was, we combined a whole bunch of lessons, and that's how we put it down. So then last year when we had to go all digital, we made this note packet so that we could just give them the whole thing at one time on Canvas, and they could kind of go in and fill things out as we went through. And then of course we found lots of things to change through that. So we've changed it a little bit for this year. And then we'll see where it goes. So I'm going to go through that a little bit with you and just kind of show you how we set it up. And then the last thing, we have assessments, or the program has assessments that they've given you. There's lots of little like exit slips and stuff that they used. We added in some of our own quizzes because we added in the curriculum, like the characteristics of life and some of the parts of the cells that it wasn't really covered in there, that we kind of put into it as we were going through. So we created some of our own quizzes or took theirs and elaborated on them. And then they also have a final assessment, and we put our final assessment because we changed it quite a bit from what the original one was. So that's in that folder on that shared drive too. So you can kind of look at that compared to the original one and kind of see what's going to work for you. But if we go into, let's see if I can, oh, I hate this. That shared drive. This was our notes packet, the chicken notes outline. So this is what we had. And I mean, I know you guys can read this, so I don't want to spend too much time, but we condensed a lot down. You'll find that as you go through, some of it is kind of redundant. They had them writing a lot of things, like in terms of what are you noticing, wondering, and questions that you have. And we just felt like some of it was just overkill because we never went back to it. And so we kind of pared down some of that through all of this. But at the top in each box, that's the lesson. So each little mini lesson, there's that question there. And then like this one, they're really just watching videos because that's that very first one and trying to figure out what to do. And then as you get into lesson 2, oh no, this is still lesson 1. They're building, this is where they draw their initial model and think about what do they think is happening in an egg that hatches into a chicken and an egg that doesn't. And then down here at the bottom, I'll tell you this are changes from this year. There's a notes packet, and then they have what they call the model tracker. And at the end of every lesson, they wanted them to go in and write down, like, basically pull out the key things that we learned and then draw how we could add that to our model. What would we draw? What would it look like in our model if we were going to draw this? But it became a lot of writing and back and forth between like the notes. So we kind of just added the model tracker down at the bottom of each lesson. So if there's something that we could add to our model, something else that we would need to draw in our model for, you know, to show that lesson, then we've just kind of put it there. Yeah. So when you see, it'll tell you when you get in and you look at the lessons, each individual lesson, what you're doing. Every one of them tells you, go back to the model tracker, refer to the model tracker. And we've just kind of combined the two because it was just a lot for them to have, you know, the notes tell them already. It was just adding in that model piece to it. So it was just easier to kind of put it with what did they learn in their notes. Lesson 2 is where you start to get into that. What do they need, and thinking about how we could set up an incubator. Most of the time, there's usually 1 or 2 kids every year that have had chickens, or grandparents have had chickens or whatever. So they have some sort of idea of incubating and what they need to do. And then again, that's that. How can we represent this in our model? That's that model tracker we added in. Lesson 4, they start to look at the development, what's happening inside. So they're looking at these pictures, and this is where you have that opportunity to candle if you have the eggs, and kind of show them because they can see the veins growing in those first, 5 to 10 days. So they can start to see some of that just by looking at the egg. That's a chart for them to fill out as they do it. And then there's how can we do this in our model. The biggest thing we found with their models, they in day 1 of their model, they show, or the day it's hatched, they show a tiny little chicken, and then all they do is show that chicken getting bigger, right, through their model. And so we're trying to get them to draw that there's blood vessels, and then that cells start to develop, and those cells then make a beak and wings. Is a hard concept for them. Yeah. So we're hit all why the blood vessels have to be there first, but trying to get them to draw it is really hard. Lesson 5 is where you start to compare it to other organisms. So you compare it to other egg layers versus then I think it's mammals. Then you actually get to dissect an egg and look at the parts of it. So you just go to the store and buy a bunch of eggs, and they crack them open and they draw it and kind of look at what they do, you know, if they take their time and really look, they start to see, you know, the little white spot, the germinal disc on the yolk and that sort of thing. And then we talk about, they kind of make guesses at what they think each part does. And then we go through and as you go through the next few lessons, then you start to kind of share that with them and they start figuring out a little bit more. So like the egg and the yolk, you look at nutritional labels, what are they getting from it? And then again, we're going back and how can we model that in our final model? And then, so now we're getting to that cell level. So this is kind of where we made big changes in the curriculum with the cells and trying to incorporate some of the stuff that we needed to know. And I think it was like, what was it, our second year? We tried to do a whole lot with cells and put everything in there. And then what we found was we kind of got lost in the storyline because we tried to put too much in and it drew it out too long. So then for last year, we went back and we're like, okay, just keep it simple. And then we can always come back and touch on it again when we do like the, what do we do next? How the the body systems and how the molecules move and stuff like that. So we revisited a lot of stuff after we finished the whole story just to not drag it out too far. So we talk about the blood and what it's made of and what its purpose is. And then we look at a whole bunch of zebrafish and the new cells. Those videos are really cool of what's happening and they start to put together that the cells are dividing. And so then here we have to draw a model of exactly kind of how that's happening and, you know, how we go from 1 to 2 to 4. And then we go back and look at a whole bunch of different organisms in the cells and start to look at evidence for them, like the onion root tips and how you see, you know, 2 cells that are still kind of connected. And so they start to piece those things together that other things also are doing the same thing as our chickens. And how and why does this happen? Yeah, so then we also then talk about single celled versus multicellular. So I think we had them look at bacteria and kind of make some connections there. And then in lesson 13, you're kind of going back, you know, they knew that it needed moisture. They kind of figure that out in that first week of lessons based on the things that are happening. And so now we're going back, if it needs moisture, how would it get it? And so we start to, you know, touch on osmosis, but we didn't go into depth here. We kind of talked about it and then came back to it again and reviewed it after we finished this whole storyline. So there's that. And then we looked at other animals developing. And then there's sort of 2 culminating things here. Lesson 15, they make a list if they're going to make a final model. What is everything that they would have to have in the final model? And we kind of did this in groups and then as a class and had them make their list. And then we had them draw their final model using this as a checklist and going through and, you know, making sure that all these things were included in it and checking them off as they went. And then in that folder was the actual unit assessment. And so that's there. We had them comparing that to, like, if you cut your finger, how would you go about healing it? And so trying to get them to think about, you know, you would have to make new cells and that sort of thing. So it's a lot of looking at other stories and how does it apply? Anything else you guys can think of?
Just maybe like with that assessment, give them plenty, like with the assessment, if you use it, like just give your students plenty of advance notice, I guess, that it's like an application test. Like they have to take the information from the chicken storyline and apply it to other scenarios, as opposed to it just being questions about chickens. Because, you know, sometimes kids don't expect that. And then they're like, this isn't even about chickens. So just give them a heads up that it's applying that same knowledge and those same concepts. And you'll understand what I mean when you look at the test. But
Does anybody have questions for us? I might need time to process. I don't know. It's a lot of
I have a
information.
question for you, Adrian. So where do you teach anything about cells before you start this, or do you just that the whole cells unit is embedded within this?
We did.
so,
Go ahead.
well, you can chime in too. So I think I heard, oh, am I muted still? I don't know. So your question was, do we teach cells before?
Yeah, so you said that you were going to start like around October. I guess my question is, what are you teaching between the beginning of school and October?
No.
So we start with some scientific method review stuff. We kind of go over like some of the characteristics of life, that kind of thing. But we start incubating the eggs in October, but the storyline starts before that.
Okay.
So when we teach cells, we teach it alongside the chicken thing. So we don't do like a standalone lesson. We do still do some notes just on some of the basic parts, but we've trimmed that down a lot. And that's kind of what Adrian was saying is we did kind of like, we stepped away from the storyline and we did our whole standard cell unit that we used to always do. And then it just made it way too long. And by the time we got to the end of it, the kids were like, the eggs had hatched and they were like 2 weeks in the background. They were like, I don't even know what you're talking about anymore. So we've kind of trimmed down, I guess, our cell unit a lot. I don't know if you want to add to that, Adrian.
No, I think we did our muted. No, I think we did our project last year. We had them do more of a drawing instead of like a big model or whatever, just so it would be less time. But we really pared down our parts that we taught them to the basic stuff that was just in the curriculum. But yeah, we stuck it in there. We just made it go a little faster. Because you touch on it so much when you get to the next part too, anyway, with the osmosis.
Right. It's
Yep.
repetitive a little bit.
Yep. And then
How
we skipped through osmosis pretty fast and just kind of talked about it in terms of what the chicken needs. But we did come back because we had to do photosynthesis and respiration. So
Yeah.
we did an osmosis lab after the whole chicken storyline unit to kind of go back. So you review those parts again.
And as it's kind of the point of a storyline too, they sort of construct that cell knowledge as they're going. So they understand that, okay, we need this humidity and it's got to get in this egg somehow. So it's got to go through somewhere. So there has to be holes in that membrane or whatever. And they'll see that membrane when they dissect it. So then they understand that there's something protecting it, but that it also has like pores in it, that there's still a way for those small molecules to move through. So they can construct that knowledge and then we just clean it up a little bit for them with the cell part.
Did you do the egg osmosis lab? Like the ADI lab with the egg osmosis? Did you guys do that? Or I guess not.
ADI lab with osmosis?
The ADI osmosis lab.
Oh,
But it's after this.
we did, but we did it
Okay.
after the storyline.
Got it. Got
Yep.
it.
So we finished the storyline and came back, and it's good too because they already know it from the chickens. So then when you're showing them with something else, they kind of start making a better connection with it.
Right.
Yeah.
The only other question I had was how many eggs do you incubate, and do you think you have to have the physical eggs in order to do the storyline?
No, you do not have to have the eggs. I think you could do it without. There's so many videos, and you can get online and find candling videos and everything. You would not need them. But what did we do? We got like 10 a piece. 10 or 12 a piece. It depends on where you order from and how much they cost. Yeah, and what they have in stock. So like last year when we had to order from My Pet Chicken, they have an educational packet or whatever you want to call it. Like you can order and they have chickens and they just give you whatever random ones are left over. Where the other one, you have to choose what chickens. And so you order them like however you can order 2 or you can order 50, you know. So that'll make a difference too. And then we always put in a couple from the store. And then if you have anybody in your building that raises chickens, it's always fun because the whole process of fertilization comes up in the last lesson and why, going back to the whole original story of why do some hatch and some don't. So usually we have Mrs. Embry bring us in a few from her farm. And then it's kind of a crapshoot if they're going to hatch or not, you know, so we can kind of talk about that at the end. Why did some of hers hatch and why some of them didn't?
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of a good lesson too, because, you know, if you put the ones from the grocery store in your incubator as well, so then it's like, okay, well, they were exposed to the same conditions as the ones that did hatch. So, you know, what was it about the store ones? Because once you get into this, they're all thinking that like the eggs in their refrigerator are going to hatch, or that they, you know, killed baby chickens or whatever. And so once they figure out that most of the ones from the grocery store are unfertilized, that does kind of ease those thoughts a little bit.
Anybody else?
Real quick, while we have a second, I'm taking attendance. Melinda Dillon, are you with us? Because I just didn't see your name.
No, she got pulled into a different reading section.
She's a sped teacher.
Yes. So
Okay.
she's not here.
Okay, and then Chris Auden.
Odin?
I think Chris Oden is with Adrian.
Yeah, he's in there.
Okay,
Give him the link though, because he forgot to sign up.
okay. Well, I will send his name to Marilyn then. But that
Okay.
was one thing. Thank you.
Okay, well, so if anybody has any questions, if you guys are thinking about doing it, we'll be happy to share any of our stuff with you. I gave you kind of the basics, but if you want anything else, we don't mind sharing any of it. So just, yeah, student samples, that's a good one if you want any of that kind of stuff. They have some of that too in the original curriculum, but we'll be happy to. So feel free to email any of us or whatever, and we'll get it to you. Okay, so who wants to go next?
I would say let Michelle's group go with that, and then I can kind of piggyback off of the McKenna storyline and then talk about the other ones that I was thinking. If that makes sense.
Okay.
Then we're going in order of the year.
Yeah.
Okay, so Michelle, is this your presentation? That's Debray. So
No, Megan, can you hear me? Oh shoot.
do you want me to try and make you the moderator?
I somehow lost everything. Can you unmute and try to talk? I'm not muted, but I can't hear anything.
Who's not muted?
Oh wait, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. I have to unplug from my main speaker in order for people to hear me. It's a weird thing.
Oh, mine too. I have to do that too.
Okay, so my video is just not working. Let me pull up. Megan had the presentation on her computer. I will pull it up real quick.
Do you want me to
No,
this
keep
to
it.
you then? You want me to try and move it to you? so
Yeah,
you
no,
can-
I'll do it. Megan's here right next to me. Let's see, that was slides, right? Yeah. I just got it yesterday. It should be right there. Since I'm not vaccinated, right there. Okay, so here, you did virtual. Get that to present. I don't remember how it's been forever.
And
It's what I had to do all last year.
All right,
you don't-
Megan's,
we don't have sharing privileges.
we don't have sharing privileges right now.
It's right. I got to give it to you.
Okay.
So who do you want me to give it to?
Me, it's on my computer, Michelle.
Host, presenter, panelist. Or maybe I can't. All attendees.
We can share the slides to you.
It's in the 7th grade. Yeah, and tell them it's also in that 7th grade.
They can
integrated-
hear you.
Oh, it's in the integrated folder where you guys just put your chicken.
Oh. Yep. So I can just pull this up.
Yeah.
So just yell at me if you need me to move it.
You can see.
I mean, we still don't have sharing privileges.
I think she's just presenting from her computer.
Yeah. I don't know how to move it. I don't know how to give you sharing privileges. I can't figure it out.
Gotcha, yeah. If you just want to present that, then we'll just tell you when to move the slide.
Okay.
Just so you know, our presentation was much more basic than what you guys had because we have our folders laid out day by day and what was shared in there. So at the beginning of the slides, there's a link to our Google folders and we have our lessons broke down day by day. We've done this storyline the past 2 years and it's definitely still a work in progress. Our storyline is for the human body unit and pull in cell processes with it as well. So basically this storyline is about a girl named McKenna. It is a real life situation about a girl that was sick. So the unit actually starts with like real doctor's notes, real endoscopy images and things for kids to look at. We didn't make up this storyline. We got it from some document. I forget where it was from, but it was like over 300 pages of stuff we went through and kind of cut down to what we wanted the first year. And then we found we wanted to cut down more and then we still have some refining to do. So this storyline takes the kids through the story about a girl who's sick and they start by seeing her symptoms. And through seeing her symptoms, they learn about the different body systems and how they work. Now, this storyline itself focuses heavily on the digestive system. So we are like the first year, it got pretty repetitive. And so then we cut it down last year, but we still need to work in the other body systems better. Again, this year, we want to rework it to cut down on the digestive system even more to incorporate the other body systems better. Within this storyline, we do the Osmosis ADI lab because the osmosis ties in with that digestive system and how the intestines absorb nutrients. Because the quick synopsis is that this girl has celiac, but the kids don't determine that to the very end of the unit, and they argue from evidence with that. So if you guys want to change that to the first slide. So that's the link to the folder that's got, or that has all of our different days and folders and all the different documents that we use. So if anybody wants to take a look in there.
So hopefully that works. And if it doesn't, let us know.
Yeah. And if you want to go ahead and go to the next slide, Odin. Odin, are you the one controlling that? Okay. So, so basically students receive information about this girl, McKenna. She's 13 years old. They actually have an audio of the girl speaking about her symptoms with an interviewer. And there's an audio transcript that the kids follow along with. And then they highlight all these different symptoms they're noticing her have. So they go through a 12-day process of looking at different artifacts. They'll see things like endoscopy images, the doctor's notes, and there's a great deal of charts and graphs for kids to analyze.
And it says 12-day now because that's what we're hoping to cut it back down to. But last year, I think we still had it at 17. So that's just kind of a typo.
Yeah, but that's
Yeah.
still with doing the ADI lab and
Yes,
stuff in
yeah.
there. So if you could go to the next slide.
So this is what we did. This is how it's laid out from last year. So The first 3 days is just basically the introduction. So students tend to start with, we give her a transcript with the symptoms. They listen to McKenna describing in first person the audio of what her symptoms were, kind of just like an interview. And then we also give her, the students, the doctor's notes, and we have them highlight and what else?
They highlight all of the symptoms that they're noticing from the doctor's note and the transcript of her describing what was wrong with her. And then they map the symptoms. So there's a page that has 6 body systems. And then the kids write the symptoms with where they think it belongs. Like she had headaches, they would have to see, okay, that's the nervous system. She had stomach aches, that was the digestive system. She had muscle aches, the muscular system. And this is prior to learning human body systems. We actually do just like 1 day of a human body systems interactive activity, just so they have a preview of body systems. So it gives them just a little base knowledge of that. So what they notice from that is that McKenna has these symptoms that are affecting like 5 different body systems. So from there, we get the actual endoscopy images to see a healthy person versus hers, and they can see, ooh, something's definitely wrong. And from looking at it, they see it's the small intestine. Small intestine that's the most different. So from there, they investigate that further. So they look at actual data. It's all real data that was collected on how this girl was absorbing nutrients from a graham cracker. So they have this whole chart of what I see and what it means, where they're tracking, okay, I see all these different histograms and bar graphs, but what is it telling us? And what they see is that in a healthy person compared to her, she's not absorbing nutrients. Food's staying in there when it shouldn't. So from there, they do a CER. We've got quite a few CERs in this storyline where they start developing a claim of what they think is different about McKenna from a normal person, basically. You can go to the next slide. So then in the next few days, we incorporate osmosis and diffusion because we left off with that CER of, okay, she's not absorbing nutrients. Well, that process comes through osmosis. And so we do our osmosis ADI lab. We do the one where we've got the dialysis tubing, and we do, you know, the whole saltwater solutions versus
Tap water.
yeah, the tap water or distilled water. We actually use distilled water. Yeah, distilled water works a whole lot better than tap water. And then from there, they kind of see the whole process of how nutrients could even be absorbed in there. So we teach that. And just a note with that ADI lab, we do not do a lab report with that ADI. We actually do a different ADI in the spring where we do the full ADI lab report. We actually just end with a claims evidence justification for that ADI. So from there, we actually teach osmosis and diffusion because that's part of the ADI process, let them experiment and then explicitly tell them about it. And then we do this, we did it the year before. I don't know if we did it last year.
I think we did.
I think we did, but there is an interactive online where kids can drag different types of cells into solutions that are hypertonic, isotonic, and hypertonic. And we like that because it's one of the only times we get qualitative data. We have a chart where the kids actually chart what happens to the cell and describe it instead of actually taking quantitative data. And we had an ed puzzle we taught that with. So we completely embedded osmosis within this part of McKenna. And we just constantly referred back to McKenna while we were doing it. It's directly related, exactly. So we can go to the next slides. So from there, we switch back from the osmosis back to McKenna, seeing, okay, we see this diffusion. She's not absorbing nutrients. It has to do with this diffusion. So they go back and look at that even more. So they go to analyze organ function even more. And again, it's digestive system, but they're looking at the function of the mouth to the esophagus, to the stomach, to the large intestine. And through that data, they can really see what is supposed to be left of the nutrients that are coming out of you. One of McKenna's big symptoms is diarrhea. And the kids find that, oh, you're only supposed to have water and fiber in your poop. Yes. Versus all this other stuff. She's got carbs and everything else coming out in her bowel movements when she shouldn't. And from there, we do a Villi Lab where, is that in here? Yeah. So the Villi Lab is through NetLogo. It's a website that's interactive, and the kids will actually like change the height of the villi, which are the finger-like structures in the small intestine that have cells that absorb nutrients. So what they learn is that when the villi are shorter, there's less cells. And they make that connection with osmosis that, well, without the cells there, there's nowhere for the nutrients to absorb into. Because that's what happens with celiac disease. Their small intestine, the villi, get destroyed, which takes away from cells that can actually absorb nutrients. So from that, they're able to diagnose her. They actually have a chart that has multiple different diagnoses, like Crohn's disease, or what else is with the celiac? There's multiple, there's like 6 different conditions. And so the chart has like symptoms, the way that that looks on an endoscopy image, and then things that can cause it. And so the kids have to use that whole chart and pull out evidence to really make a diagnosis. So at the end, they're diagnosing her, and they should be celiac based on
The evidence.
yeah, the evidence. They have to pull evidence from the endoscopy images, from the doctor's notes. So they're pulling in lots of evidence to write their final CER for that. So from there, we just kind of segued to respiration and included that with that stuff. So if you want to go to the next slide. Is that it? Yeah, because that's pretty much the end of the unit for us. So yeah, the whole idea with McKenna focused a lot on the digestive system. So following this, we just spent a couple days on each, on each of the other systems that we needed to focus on. So what we want to do this year is figure out how to better incorporate the other body systems in with this. Because throughout McKenna, we do mention she's got muscle aches, that's the muscular system. She feels faint and dizzy, the nervous system. So that is embedded in some of it, just not as much as we'd like, and we're going to be working on that. So everything we do day by day is in that folder with that link at the beginning. If that link doesn't work, just let us know.
Do you guys have any questions?
Can't hear her.
I can hear it.
Hang on, we can't hear you, Adrian.
Oh, I was just talking to my team. I was trying to think of,
Gotcha.
because we did McKenna last year. And we came up with some little thing at the end to try and talk about the others, but I was trying to remember what we did to look at the other systems, but.
Well, there was some stuff within that original McKenna storyline where we got the information from. Like there's a part about the respiratory system, and we actually used the CO2 probes and plug those in, and we like show the kids that when you breathe, carbon dioxide's coming out. So we do that with the cellular respiration. We tie respiratory system in when we talk about respiration with that. So we've got little ways of doing it. We just definitely feel that we just want to make it better.
Especially
Yeah.
the muscular and the skeletal.
We don't have to do skeletal, but the muscular and the,
They do that with
yeah.
her, so.
Yeah, with the circulatory system, we spend a day on that. It's just, before we had McKenna, it was just the old way of teaching of here is a body system. Okay, let's do a lab. Here's a body system. Okay, let's do a lab. So through this, we're just trying to make it all piece together more and show how the systems affect one another. Because really at the end of McKenna, what they see is her digestive system is the problem, but we do connect it back to the fact, well, when we first did this the first day, you guys saw that there were 4 other body systems affected. That she was short on breath. That's the respiratory system. So they have to pull in, well, that's because of respiration. You need oxygen and glucose. And through the whole thing, they see glucose is what she's not absorbing really in her digestive system. So it really does pull it in. It's just, I think I don't know. It's just, it spends so much time on
Takes a while to
digestive.
get
We
there.
need to balance it better. If anybody has any questions, you can ask. Otherwise, that's pretty much it for now.
Comments, suggestions, we take suggestions,
Yeah.
anything.
This one.
Perfect.
Okay, so Tiffany,
Yes. So we also did the storyline. Is this our third year?
Yes.
And this is also our third year. We kind of started the same, we piggybacked off of Michelle's. I think we took a lot of their stuff and then changed it. And I know when I helped write the Canvas course in the fall last year, I tried to kind of merge between what North was doing and what we had done. I know that there were some gaps. So the one thing that I would say with this storyline is there are pieces that sometimes don't seem to fit, or you're like, why do we have to do this? And I think this past year, it really fit together in a better way, because in order to get the kids from understanding this piece to this piece to that piece, sometimes you need some of those little pieces that seem irrelevant.
Yeah.
So like, I know year one, we did the progress tracker, which Adrian, in your storyline with the chicken thing, you talked about that. And so the first year we did it, and we kind of did it. And we thought it was stupid. And then the second year, we really realized that that was really what helped guide and give them that like kind of overall understanding of what they were supposed to get from each lesson. And so last year, what we decided to do was, instead of having each kid fill out that progress tracker, we did one as a class on a slides presentation. And so we would share that like one slide at a time. So the kids had it to refer back to, but we didn't take the time to make every single kid write it, if that makes sense. All right, so if you want to go ahead and click the first one, there are a few things that we've considered changing. Number one, we've considered changing the patient's name every year, just so the kids don't realize it's the same case year after year. We've had some issues with 8th graders ruining it for our 7th graders, or telling them that. It would also help with kids that, on day one, despite the fact that you tell them, I don't want you to try and find it. And it is really hard for kids to find. We have had a kid or two actually find the storyline and be able to figure it out on day like 2. So we thought, well, if we just changed the name overall and just replaced it, then it would be impossible for them to find, because it wouldn't match up with anything. So that was something that we thought, although it'd be a little tedious on all of your resources to change it, but that would be something that, like I said, we've thought about doing. If you want to skip to the next one. Oh, we didn't write this in. We put it there and we didn't fill it out. So our storyline, I'll add it in. I think what I've got on our slides is about 14 days. I don't think that includes the assessment. That's just strictly the storyline. And it covers, I'll fill that in afterwards, so that way when you guys pull it up from the drive, it's there. It covers basically that whole human body. It relates how systems work together. I do really, really like this storyline. This is my 16th year teaching life science, and I can tell you that in all the ways that I've taught the human body, I feel like this does the best job with the amount of time that we're supposed to cover. So that's good. We did, if you click to the next slide, we did have some pre-lesson activities. We liked the Keeley probe that we actually blew up and had the kids walk around with Post-its to kind of get their ideas on the organization of the body first. And then we kind of we did the Jamboard, where they, really got the idea that cells and tissues make organs, and we kind of knocked that out first. We did give them just some basic vocabulary for all of the human body. We thought that would be good for them to have a working understanding of some of those words. And sometimes we have pulled in kind of an overview of the human body through that textbook. And I kind of like having that assignment maybe a little bit later, after they're kind of working through some of the systems with McKenna, I think that it fits in well there, or it's a really great one for if you need a sub somewhere in the storyline. That's a good one you can plug in. So I attached, the daily lessons that we did. They're going to look really similar to the ones that were in Canvas, but I did go through and make changes to reflect what we did here. Like I said, I wrote the Canvas, I helped with Stephanie write the Canvas course, but I know that as we went through as a CLT, we changed things. There were things that I didn't remember when I wrote curriculum that then my CLT and we worked through and changed that. So it does reflect what we did, which would be a little different. So if you click that, Adrian, see if it works. Hopefully it does. Oh, dang it. I'll have to fix it. All right. So let me, I forgot to make it. Should work, right? Okay.
Yeah, you might have, I don't know if the link will change or not. Should
Okay.
go back and try again.
All right. Hey, try that link again, see if it works. If not, I'll re-update it in a second. Nope, dang it.
Okay, what is it? Then put a new hyperlink in there.
Okay, copy. I'm gonna fix the link and then it should work. And I can also drop it in the drive as well.
Change your edit, yeah.
Okay. Maybe refresh and then try it one more time. And then we'll just move on. Dang. All right, well, such is life. So I'll go ahead and I'll drop that in that drive so you guys can see that, just so you know kind of where that's at. Did it work?
Yeah, it's working now. Showing up.
Should be a forced.
Yeah, there it
Yeah,
goes.
there you go. That's a forced copy. That's what I wanted. Perfect. So like I said, it just kind of goes through day by day how we did it. And it's going to be set up similar to what was in the Canvas
So you can
course.
scroll down and see it's not just that one page. That's what I was afraid they would.
What do you mean?
I thought she had it pulled up.
No. Adrian, did you pull up the forced copy document? If you just pull it up real quick.
I didn't pull it up. Do you want me to?
Yes, please. Just because I want to make sure,
You guys can see it all.
yeah.
that's-
So there is 14 pages. I put it all in one document. So if you scroll down, it's going to be every
Day by
page is a day. Just so that way it's kind of there. And like I said, it looks a lot like what you would have seen in the Canvas course. But again, I just changed it to match what we did. All right. So when we originally talked about doing this particular PD, I really had grand ideas of trying to write a whole nother storyline over the summer, and it did not work. It didn't happen. So these are some things, because I thought with the direction that Anne is wanting us to go with the department, it would be nice if we had a storyline or an ADI lab every quarter, like one or the other every quarter, just so that way there was one big, really rich piece in there for the quarter. So these were some ideas that we had. We talked about either natural selection, developing a storyline out of the ADI lab that we've done with the Galapagos finches, or using the human impact piece we've talked about incorporating the chasing coral video that we've done, but I could see us doing almost like a CSI type thing with some sort of a environmental issue, and then really looking at all the different pieces and interactions that are impacted with that. So if you click, again, these are not storylines. They're like not at all. They're just ideas that I think could be. So if you skip to the next one, and I probably will have to fix those links because I don't know what I was thinking. But so same thing that I did on the McKenna one, I linked our outline. It'll be, again, they're going to be rough. So let me
Got it?
try, yeah. Okay, Marcy is gonna fix our links. I think the natural selection one is not great and probably human impact. So tell me when you got it. And then we got to fill in we never went back and filled in the length or the learning objectives like we talked. I don't know what your guys' beginning of the year has been like, but ours has been a little rough.
Yeah, I feel like I'm all over the place.
I know. So it's not even going to be like what it was for the McKenna storyline. Like it's just the resources in order is all that I have. What? The natural selection outline?
Yeah.
Okay. No, share drive. You want to talk about while I do this?
Sure, yeah. Let me get my computer ready.
I call that. All right, I'm gonna let Marcia pop in. She'll talk about what we're
Okay, so.
thinking.
Is that the one we're doing right now? Or are you doing human impact?
No, go to Adrian, go back. Yep.
Yeah, there we
Want me
go.
to pull this one up?
Are you guys familiar with the grant story?
No.
Okay, so the grants is a couple that went over to the Galapagos and did some extensive research on the finches. They actually went over, this was a 20-year period?
I thought it was 40.
Yeah, so anyways, a long
A
time.
very long time.
And they collected all the data and they actually saw the finches in our lifetime, guys, die off. And so
And change.
and their beaks change, the food sources changing. They have all of that data. And so we actually use that with the kiddos. We put up their data around the classroom. That's our kind of our intro to it. So the very first thing we do is have them read about the Galapagos, the ADI. I don't know if you guys have used that ADI.
It's actually the exact
activity.
same data set.
Okay. And so we put those data into graphs and charts and we hang them around the room and we have them go at the very beginning, look at that data and see if they can make a prediction of what might have possibly happened. Then we do, from there, we do the gizmo on the rainfall and beak size. So I don't know if you guys used that gizmo yet or not last year, and hopefully you already know we do have gizmos for this year. So that'll be good. So we use that gizmo, kind of gives them information about how the rainfall does affect it. And then we have them start setting up an initial argument like the ADI process. Using the data they had, using the gizmo they just did. And then we actually have a video on Galapagos that we included on this for you guys too. And that allows them to kind of hear the grant side of the story. It shows them some good visuals. And then they do a final investigation, looking back at that data now that they have more information and do their write-up like the ADI whiteboards. They walk around, do that argumentation piece, and then they do their own personal, the argumentative paragraph piece. It's not as involved as a full-blown ADI. We pulled quite a bit of it out, but we liked those chunks of the ADI piece with argumentation, and we wanted to keep that in with the evidence and justification. So that's what we did. And then we were going to go from that into adaptation after they've seen kind of how it actually has worked in nature at a full scale with the Galapagos finches. And so then you can just see there, we went into the peppered moth, and we're actually, when we set this up for you guys, we decided we're going to flop it like this year. So we have not taught it in this order. We usually have them, nothing like, anyway, we usually have them switch. So we usually have that bottom chunk first is what we've done in the past, but we're actually going to do it in this order this year because we think it'll flow really well. And then it'll wrap up, ending up with that behavioral adaptation piece that we use the gizmo for as well on that one. So.
And Dolly, do you mind if I chime in real quick?
Yeah, please.
So we actually focus a lot on the finches and the grants, and we've got more stuff on that if you guys would want it shared.
Yeah, stick it in there.
We start that unit by teaching adaptations just for briefly, but then we have this article that's Galapagos Finches Famous Beaks, and it's a bit of a long article, but we break it into a jigsaw, like it's in groups of 4, so each kid reads a page and then talks to each other about it. And it really just goes through the grants and their research and what they found a little bit. And then we have this assignment where there's actual images of the finches that are blown up to scale, where the kids have to measure the beak size and graph it and analyze it. So it's incorporating some of that like measurement and like graphing
Mhm.
skill. And then we've got a peppered moth web quest. So we talk about the finches and the peppered moth. And in this
Yeah.
web quest, there's actually an interactive game where the kids are the birds trying to catch the moths. They do it like in a light forest versus a dark forest to see the differences because it incorporates adaptations with natural selection. And then
Yeah, that's linked on our thing there. You guys can see the
I was
simulation.
gonna say, I think we have the same simulation. It's down the peppered moth simulation, which is a
Gotcha,
good
okay.
one.
And then
The
Caitlin
idea
in
of the
our
bird
CLT
beak, that's
came up-
cool.
Yeah, Caitlin in our CLT has a really cool activity with the finches where there's actually like laminated cards and you give each kid, it's about colors of finches. But it's all based on natural selection. So it's like this game where everybody stands up in the back of the room and then you've got these 12 scenarios that can happen that would affect either a bird with a big beak or small beak, or if they eat seeds, or if they eat, everything they eat, seeds or whatever else was they eat. And then they survive, they take a step forward. If they don't, they stay put. And the kids can see how populations sizes change like that and how you can have different traits are shown more in some populations than others over time. And we, like what we did is we took a reading on natural selection about Darwin and we made it into a Canvas. We wound up doing a bunch of assignments that were like automatically graded Canvas assignments where they did reading and like had multiple choice questions they'd answer about it. So it's about Darwin, but the finches again. So if you wanted anything more to incorporate about the finches, we have some other stuff we could share if you want.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, this is just I thought it would be, I know when we've done the lab, the first year that we did the 80, this was the first ADI lab that we incorporated after and did that PD with us. So we did the osmosis one, and then we decided that this was going to be our second one. And the data set that comes with the ADI, like the ADI lab itself, is really overwhelming for kids. I mean, like the kids looked at you like you just marched them to the top of a mountain and punted them off, because it is a spreadsheet with tabs and pages of numbers, and they have no idea what it means. And it's just a lot. So we really kind of scaled it down a little bit and gave them the guts. It also talked about forms of macroevolution and like microevolution, and we did not feel genetic drift. We did not feel like that was really emphasized in our curriculum. So we just focused, the answer is natural selection. And so we just really focused on that aspect, and then providing the evidence to support why and how they know natural selection occurred, instead of picking a form of evolution and talking about how it occurred. But I definitely think, like I said, that it's good. Now, I did find an article through NGSS on, it was basically talking about the same storyline, only again, it wasn't developed, but they gave this idea about the first 6 days being focused on observations. And I kind of have it, I linked the article for you, but then I also have kind of like how they would focus. So like I said, I found it, and we didn't, as a CLT, we really haven't had a ton of time to talk through like which of our activities would fit into these different things. But it was something that I thought we might want to consider or look at. The second half is more about them explaining and developing their explanations with inferences. So I kind of liked the flow of that. And like I said, I would take the activities and the things that we've done or are doing and kind of plot them out maybe in this order to try and help it flow better, but we didn't get that far.
And I was going to say, I think one of the main things I liked about starting with the graphs and putting those up and having the kids kind of investigate, just like we've learned through the ADI process, it's about them discovering first instead of giving them information. So I know, Michelle, you had mentioned that you guys have them watch the video stuff and those kind of things. And I don't know where you do that in the order, but we were trying to be really careful to not give them the answer and not explain why it's happened. We want them to discover that. And so that's kind of why we restructured the way we were doing it. And we want to drop adaptations down so that they recognize that something's happened and maybe make that application on their own before we give them the explicit
That
instruction.
direct.
So-
Yeah, I like that idea. Megan and I were just talking, and it'd definitely be cool to do that. And also, we're trying to keep, now after the Paul Anderson PD we're really trying to figure out how we can do more phenomenon and work in that piece where we show them something and let them think it through. So we were just talking, and it'd probably be really easy to start with phenomenon, showing them something about the birds, and then you could get into this ADI piece of collecting data and going from there.
Yeah.
So that could be another good connection we could do with that.
Right. And like I said, I was just trying to come up with, okay, so, trying to plot in where we could fit in different storylines in different quarters. So that way there would be choice, whether you did something first quarter or second quarter or whatever. So that's kind of natural selection. And this one is way more impressive than the human impact one. Human impact, we stumbled across, or I stumbled across the Chasing Coral film on Netflix, and it's really great. It's really engaging for kids. We've shown it the last 2 years. You do have to have a Netflix account, and you just download it on your computer, and then you don't have to stream it. You're just playing it from your computer. I think there is one. I don't think it's actually an explicit curse word. I don't think it is. I think he mouths a curse word. But we have not had any issues with kids. And like I said, they're really engaged with the film. So if you haven't seen it, I would definitely preview it first. But it does cover a lot of our objectives in that last unit, looking at impacts and the interdependent relationships between living things and the environment itself. And so I think that that's really a good place to start. And I came across a few things. So I plugged in the pieces that we've done. So we always have them start by looking at, there's just a bunch of really cool images of coral. Some of them are healthy coral. Some of them are the after shots, because the film basically shows a coral bleaching event across the earth. And so they have diving teams down to take photo images of befores and after. And the point is to show time lapse of not only how quickly these events occur, how drastic they occur, so you can show a before and after of really the destruction that takes place. And the cool side about that is that it is a scientific investigation. They're gathering data, but it's visual data. And so I don't think it's a different form of an investigation than what I think kids typically picture as science. And so the other part is they show the struggles and the fails of the people working on the project. So you'll see there's like 2 or 3 times where these real expensive camera systems fail, or it didn't work the way that they wanted it to, and they have to go back to the drawing board. And so I like that piece. We talk about that. And it shows the emotion of, the people working on the project and how close they get to it. And so all of that's important. Then it really talks a lot about the importance of like the communication piece with science. So yeah, we have all of this stuff and we know all this stuff. What are we going to do with it? And so the first year we did it, we had the kids, after we watched the film, we did a lot of debriefing. We talked a little bit more about coral reefs and about even the fact that they're trying to do like the replanting of coral reefs with coral reef farms. But we had the kids create a PSA. So they would research another type of human impact issue, and then they created a PSA for it, and we'd have them, hang them up and stuff like that. The Chasing Coral stuff actually has they had some suggestions of some different projects that I missed it the first year that we worked, but so I went through and they had some cool ideas. The kids would each pick a different one. And again, the idea is that they're identifying a problem, whether it's, I think it's encouraged to be local, like a local problem, and designing a solution to how to solve that problem. And then they have to come up with a way to communicate what they think about that problem or what their solution would be. So I liked that piece. I think it is a little different than what we've done in some of our other units. But again, it's like a very little beginning to an idea, but I thought it would be a cool way to get it. The coral reefs are really engaging for kids. So again, it'd be another phenomena that I think could easily tie into what we're doing. Yes. Oh, and we incorporated endangered species into that as well and worked in. Does anyone have any questions for us? Yeah.
Computer takes a minute. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so Caitlin Pope on my team, I don't know if she can get in to speak or not. She already found your video on YouTube for free. It's through the Netflix YouTube channel, so you won't have to like download it or anything. Yeah, she's amazing with technology. Shout out, Caitlin. So yeah, it's a video you have. It's on YouTube.
Great. Like I said, it's a really good one. I know they have they have a sister, or actually one that came out prior. It's the same group, was Chasing Ice. There's a little bit more cursing in that one, and it's not quite as engaging. Like, I think kids naturally like ocean and wildlife and things like that. So looking at the ice and just the changing of the glacier is not quite as interesting, and there is more cursing in that film. But it's another good one to reference or to tell kids about, just because if they're interested in this one, they would like that one. But awesome. Anybody have any other questions or any other ideas about storylines, ideas for storylines?
Guys for sharing those ideas. We actually are really going to jump on top of some of that and like that. So I'm glad we got a chance to share, and I appreciate you guys sharing out.
Yeah, well, and I know that at one point Anne had talked about having groups kind of get together to develop storylines. Like, I'm going to be really honest. I don't know that I really know the whole format of going through step by step and creating a full storyline. But
Well, remember, we tried to do that a couple years ago, but it's before any of us
Right.
had any actually doing it. So we didn't feel prepared at that time. And honestly, there's still a big learning curve.
well, and it's time. We have to have the release time to get together to work on it.
Oh, it's a crap ton of time. When we first made our McKenna thing, Megan Hawkins and I had like sleepovers. Like, we would work till we couldn't work anymore and then just go to bed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the McKenna storyline, straight up, we would plan it. We'd come in, we'd teach it, and then be like, okay, that's not going to work. We got to redo this.
Yeah.
And sometimes it surprises you. Like I said, the way that the storylines that are already done, sometimes the way that they're written doesn't make sense until you do it. And they're like, oh, that's why you needed to do this piece before that piece, or incorporate this step in somewhere. So like I said, I don't know that I 100%, like I want like a template, like a fill in the blank type deal. And I don't know that that's really the way it works.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I wish it were that easy.
I know,
Yeah.
right?
Be like the ELA curriculum. Here you go. Here's everything. you need.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like sometimes with storyline, it's you got to remember what your end goal, like your objective is, because I feel like it would be really easy to go off on a tangent into something that isn't important for the curriculum.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest thing with the chicken one, because it's pretty long. So, well, we ran into that the first year, especially like just trying to do what they gave us and then incorporate our other stuff in. And we were like, you can't do it. It was way too much.
But I
And
feel like the chicken storyline, what interests me about that one is that it works in some of those little concepts that kind of don't really fit into some of the other units, like, you know, asexual sexual reproduction. You could fit that in there, right?
Right.
Multicellular, unicellular. It kind of seems to incorporate some of those into, I guess, a way that would be a more relevant way of learning it to the kids versus just learning it in isolation one after another.
Yeah. And it is nice because you do touch on it, but you don't go into huge detail, but then we come back to it. We mention it so many times
Right.
and they remember it. So makes it easy.
Yeah. Well, maybe if we get some more time, definitely, Michelle, if you guys start delving in or working on the natural selection, we would like to piggyback or kind of drop in what you've got and we can kind of maybe work on it collectively.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've got it on my list to share all the resources we have because we kind of have what you have. I've got a document where it's just like day by day what we do in the unit, but I don't have links. That's a really good idea. But yeah, for sure. I've got it right here towards the top of my to-do list to share that stuff. So where would you like that shared? In the folder that you already have? Or just like,
Yeah, I would just say go ahead and put it right there in that storyline folder, and then that's where we'll know that it is. And then
okay, I'll do that today.
Yeah.
and maybe
put
inside
in
the
our-
storyline folder, we should make make a folder for egg, McKenna, whatever, and then it's all in a folder together.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we
because
originally
I can
had
put
a
ours in
storyline
there too
folder
then.
somewhere. Because our folders need to be cleaned up. Because I think somewhere in there already is a folder, and we just need to get it organized. Yeah.
I am not gonna lie. Last January, when Stephanie and I were working on second semester, the drives are a hot mess. Like half the drives
they are.
were not named correctly, or they had the wrong objectives in. Like it was not great.
Oh yeah, and then there's the difference between the old documents we had and then the
Yes.
new ones that
Yes.
changed.
I think we shared with Anne which folders needed to go and be deleted, but I haven't.
I don't know that they were. I don't know. I mean, I just know that there's a lot in there, and I can imagine, like I said, if you were new and teaching the curriculum, you would not know that it wasn't right. But we've also changed things in the last 2 years, so you know, there's that too.
Yeah.
How heavily are you guys using Canvas? Because last year we did darn near everything on Canvas, and we're kind of just still in the same boat. Like we'll do some paper things, but we're pretty much doing everything in Canvas every day.
Here at West,
we-
pretty much everything is Canvas here because we haven't even had a copy clerk for the last year. And we still don't have one this year. So we pretty much do everything exclusively on Canvas.
So
I'm going back to all paper this year.
we put everything on Canvas, so there is an electronic version for kids if they, you know, so it's not a big deal when kids get quarantined or are absent or sick or whatever. But we are doing as much paper pencil as we can. We even started paper pencil last year. The kids overwhelmingly prefer it, just because ELA is almost 100% on the computer at this point. Social studies is doing a lot on the computer. Our math people said hell no to electronic because it's just too hard with math. They did paper all year last year. So I just think that there's a lot that it overcomplicates it if it's all electronic. But I mean, we are going to put everything on Canvas just like we did last year because it made it way easier when kids would come in or go or be sick or whatever.
Yeah, we did a lot of automatically graded Canvas assignments. And Caitlin Pope is amazing with the technology to figure out how to do different things with it. But we also heavily used Cami. So things that would normally be paper, and we got, since the kids have touch screens, we got stylus and stuff where they could actually write. And then grading in Cami is super easy. So yeah, we we heavily use that. We'll still do our notes on paper because we believe in you remember things better when you write them out because all science backs that. But yeah, we have a lot. Like we post everything in Canvas every day. Yeah. If you guys
Michelle, what
Yeah,
kinds of things are you having self-graded besides like multiple choice or like an ed puzzle? Like, what are you using?
So if you use Canvas quizzes just as an actual assignment, it can have drag and drops, it can have fill in the blank. And then there's even just like short answer where part of it might be where they just highlight information. And then the other part is a short answer that you quickly grade on your own. We try to get, since they don't have textbooks really, we barely use Discovery. We try to find articles, at least one for every unit. Like we've got one on Darwin. We had one on genetic traits about these people that were a family that were blue, like they had blue colored skin. So we would do the reading and then just have like multiple choice or like a mixture of fill in the blank that's automatically graded. And that easily allows you to have kids even redo assignments. We got to the point where we're like, you can redo it as many times as you want for the highest grade because they just reinforce those skills. And it's extremely easy to modify for your SPED kids because you can color code the question and highlight it in the text. So we didn't do it all the time by any means, but when we did do it, it was very beneficial for the kids and us. And then we mostly used Cami. So anything we would do as a Google Doc or whatever, we would put it in Cami and it was easy to grade that way.
Yeah, and we did Cami a lot for the kids that were full virtual, but for our kids who were here seated, they did paper.
I got to a point where sometimes I made it optional for some things, but not others. Like when we did our McKenna storyline, we didn't do any paper this year. We made a running document in Cami where they're mapping the symptoms, their models they were drawing, even their CERs. It was in that same Cami document. So day by day, we would just go to the next document that's in that same Cami. And that way it was really easy for the kids to get to because the year prior, when we first did McKenna and it was all on paper, we did portfolios with paper where every day they added a new paper to their portfolio. But, you know, with COVID, we couldn't do that, but we really liked the way it panned out doing it in Cami like that.
So we did something kind of similar where like the day that we did something, the next day we would post the key in Canvas so the kids could reference it, but then they had their own paper version. So again, that they were drawing, because I don't know what your kids' Chromebooks are like, but we had kids' Chromebooks that were not touchscreen. So they had to use a mouse to draw, which was nearly impossible with some of the modeling and drawing, which there's a lot in the McKenna storyline. So that's where, like I said, they had paper and then we would provide like cleaned up nice references that they could go back and look, especially if they couldn't find theirs or if they lost theirs or if they were absent and they did it, but they didn't, 100% understand. And that seemed to work really well.
Yeah, our kids have touch screens. Luckily, that's why we got stylists because they could draw with it. But even for kids that weren't comfortable doing that, or for the few kids that just happen to have a random different Chromebook, what we'd have them do is like draw it on paper, but then just use their Chromebook to take a picture of it and insert the document.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Trying to think if there's anything else while we're all together.
How's it going, West?
We're surviving. We just didn't present today because when we talked to Anne, we knew 2 other teams were already doing McKenna. And that was the only storyline that we did last year. I had found a resource. I'd actually shared it with Adrian on photosynthesis for a storyline there. But like you guys were mentioning earlier, it seemed like there were a lot of tangents that it went on that weren't related to our curriculum. So my plan was to sit down this summer and try to meet with Adrian to make a useful storyline out of it. And then we moved houses. So that didn't happen. So that's why we didn't present today, was because we thought, well, 2 other schools are presenting on McKenna. I really don't think people want to sit and listen to a 3rd McKenna. But
Well-
if I get something on the photosynthesis storyline done at all, I'll share that out.
Did you guys do
Yeah,
it
that'd be great.
drastically different from what we talked about?
I'm sure we made changes as we went, but honestly, nothing was drastically different than what you guys mentioned.
Okay.
We did feel like, since it was our first time doing it, we kind of went with the plan that you and I had written already, Tiffany, based
Right.
on North's experience and your experience. But we did agree after we did it last year, our PLC thought it was heavily digestive system based.
Yeah.
And we're working on finding ways to incorporate more of those other body systems. Like I know nervous system specifically is mentioned in the curriculum. And we were trying to think.
And
of a
it's
way
real
that-
light.
Yeah,
It's like a footnote.
yeah.
Well, and
Yeah,
what
and if you guys find ways of doing that, if you could share that, that'd be great. Because what we did, like we said, at the end of the whole McKenna thing, after they diagnosed her, is like, we just took one day to talk about each of those systems more specifically. So it's more the old style. It wasn't really fully embedded.
Yeah.
Right, and that's kind of what we ended up doing was we just kind of went back and touched on those things after McKenna ended. We didn't really have any great engaging hands-on ways because I know everything was pretty much hands-off with COVID last year, but if we do come up with anything, we'll share it out.
So we did, with all of her symptoms that you list out, there's a chunk that are specific digestive, but then it kind of branches into the other systems from there. That's how, like the secondary symptoms versus the primary. So we looked at the secondary symptom, like the fact that she was falling asleep so much. And we we would tie that into, that's her nervous system. How is that being affected? We kind of did some of that too. So looking, yeah, the foggy brain, how that got brought into. So, I mean, that was one of the ways that we let in, because the kids were like, well, then what about, why does she have all these other symptoms? And we said, well, why does she? And we kind of had them search that up too. That allowed us to branch kind of seamlessly instead of it seeming like a separate chunk, if that makes sense.
Yeah, our kids did recognize that the nervous system was involved, but we found that we needed to go back after it was all over to talk a little bit more about the nervous system because they were like, I know that's the nervous system, but I don't know anything about the nervous system. Like they could identify it, but they struggled with knowing a little bit more. So that's why we went back afterward and did a brief overview of the others.
Right. Well, and like I said, I mean, I definitely think that there is the definite potential to go into some of that a little bit more than what we had. I think we just had a video for nervous system, but yeah, I don't have anything. So if you find something, put it in the folder.
I'll throw it in there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, send out an email. If we find stuff like that fits with something, send out an email so we know to go look for it. Maybe. I don't know.
All right, go, like seriously, like why don't we go work on trying to get this incorporated?
Yeah.
Like why don't we use the rest of the time?
Yeah.
Adrian, what do you think about that? Using the rest of the time to try to figure out how to incorporate some of this and get it started. Since you guys have the cell stuff right at the beginning.
The cell stuff?
Well, I'm just saying, like, don't you think we could use the rest of our time to actually try to talk?
Well, we only
with
got
our
10 minutes.
We only have 10 minutes, but yeah.
No, because I said end 10 minutes
Oh,
early so
perfect.
people have time to get into the next session. Because I think we're good.
Go fill that out.
Go fill out the evaluation. Yeah.
So question for you guys. Did any of you actually do the science benchmarks last year?
Nope.
Nope,
Yes.
not here at West.
We did a DMS. We did all of them.
Yeah, we didn't do it last year just because we were so uncertain about when we'd be here, when we weren't. And in like the beginning of the school year, I was kind of frantic of just, I want to get in everything that's important before these kids go virtual, because that's kind of mind state I was in.
Virtual.
So we wound up skipping it. But at the end of the year, I had my kids go one of the benchmarks just to have some exposure to it.
We should probably.
But we have a lot of kids coming in that were virtual the entire year last year. So many of them didn't even participate. And our 6th grade didn't give benchmarks either. So it's going to be a crapshoot with these kids doing our benchmarks this year, and
So,
even the process.
I
to do
have
it.
and I'll share it. I'll figure out how to do it. We actually created 4 short assessments in Canvas that kind of reflect the style of the benchmarks, like the question style, the rigor of the benchmark. Now, they're not perfect. There were mistakes in them, but that's what we gave our virtual kids. And the cool thing about it is that we have them that we could use as like mini quizzes, because they're only 12 questions long. Instead of just only having those couple big benchmarks, it could be a quick, it might take the kids like 20, 30 minutes.
So benchmark has 2 scenarios, so we made 4 scenarios.
Yeah, we try to do some we do daily questions, and we would try to do some questions that mimic the style more of the benchmark, and try to work with multiple choice questions more, because we don't normally do that in our everyday everything.
Well, so the benchmark has 2 scenarios, and it's 12 questions, 12 questions. And what we made was one shorter scenario with 12 questions. So like I said, we have 4 of those that are different. So we'll share those, because like I said, we wanted our virtual kids, our in-person kids all took the benchmark, but we wanted the kids that were virtual to still do something. So that way they were still kind of keeping up with the way everything else was going. They wouldn't be behind the other kids. We created those on our own. So again, they're not perfect, but it is something, and it would be something that if you wanted to do like a quick check, or if you had extra time somewhere and you just wanted extra practice, you could use.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. And those were through Canvas, so it'd be easy to push out.
Sweet.
I can't think of anything else that we did. Put that on my list.
On an unrelated note, we were talking about our slow as a 7th grade, because we obviously didn't do the benchmarks last year, so our slow was totally different. Are you guys at your building scaffolding your slows with 6th grade doing variables, 7th grade doing something, and 8th grade doing something?
Yeah, we do it North Middle.
what
6th
their
grade
slow is
focuses
on.
on variables and hypothesis, and 7th grade we focus on data tables and graphs. And then in 8th grade, they're focusing on the CER.
Okay.
We just
Because
do the
we do
overall
CER,
test.
we
Now
do CER throughout, but on the template, they're working on the CER as it pertains to like the conclusion.
Got it.
So at DMS, we are not scaffolding like the slow per se, because we have, our 8th grade teachers, they are doing their slow over a unit. They're not doing it over the benchmark. There's been a lot of discussion in that they like the benchmarks for the purpose of, getting kids better at scientific process, but they don't have to do it over scientific process. So we just have done ours over the kids' overall benchmark scores. And I think that's what 6th grade did. But like I said, I know our 8th grade, they picked a unit and they did like a pre-assessment, and then they did checks in between, and then they did a post-assessment, and that was their slow.
Yeah, my impression is that when we do these slows, it's all about building skills. So that's why we focus so heavily on doing this with the template, because we want them to carry the skills to the next year. And so that's why we scaffold it, is because with the template, 6th grade focuses on the first few pages, and then we feel in 7th grade, it's our job to get them through the conclusion, but heavily they will know how to do a data table and a graph.
Yeah. And we do that as a building, as far as how we're where our focus is with scientific process. But again, according to our principal, slow is determined by the teacher and by what the teacher wants it to be. So he is not mandated that it has to be the scientific process with the benchmarks. And they can decide kind of like, it could be, I think what they picked last year was a new unit that they were developing or whatever, I don't know. But that's what they chose.
At South Middle 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, last year we did not do the benchmark. So we didn't do anything. I can't even remember what we did, but the years before we staggered it because the 6th grade spent so much time on IVDV hypotheses, and then we did graphing, data table and graphing. Oh, last year our focus was on technology, something.
But we've also,
So,
1 year we did our slow was based off of the benchmark, but it's our PGP that was model based, so.
oh yeah, modeling, we did modeling for something. Yeah, so I don't know what we're gonna do this year. We don't have to do it on the benchmark, but we just have in the past.
I think it's easy to do it on the benchmark, which is why I think we've just stuck with it, especially because I feel like we've gotten more intentional about incorporating in those pieces all year long than what I did maybe 12 years ago. But I know 8th grade our 8th grade teachers felt like the students really plateau with scientific process. And so they were having a hard time getting the gains because they're just, I don't know if it's the format of the 8th grade benchmarks or what, but it was really hard for kids to make the gains they needed for the teachers to do well with their slows.
All right, so, I mean, it's about 10 till, so I guess we're just gonna put stuff in the folders to share, and then if we can find some more time to get together and work on some of those new storylines. Or build them collectively in the drive or whatever.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks for sharing today, ladies. Appreciate it.